So, I'd like to share some reflections around African sovereign debt. Many economists across the world has been issuing signs of concerns about African sovereign debt. But if we look into reality today, we will see that most developed nations have a a debt to GDP ratio above 100% or much closer to 100%, with some exceptions of a few countries that actually have GDP to ratio above 200%. But that's not the case with most African countries. So, why is it important that we think about African sovereign debt? Here's one of the reasons. The way that is raised in Africa and the purpose of the capital that is raised through that in many African countries is the problem. Uh, Besides the concerns and issues with corruption and misallocation of these funds, there is a much greater concern in African countries because when debt is raised in many African countries, often it's not used or allocated or employed, the funds of this debt is not employed to build assets that generate income both for repayment of the debt or for the development of the country. Most often, the debt is used to fund the public administration salaries. So that's a big problem. Now, in the time of COVID 19, the only way most countries worldwide are surviving is by raising additional debt. The United States, for example, have raised more than 3 trillion US dollar just to fight the pandemic, and it's intending to raise more additional capital. For African countries, there is a little bit of buffer, but much work needs to be done. And this work that needs to be done have to be in the way of creating mechanism to serve not only to service debt, but to oversight the management of the capital raised through sovereign debt. So there is a need really to find ways to employ the capital that is raised to fund things like infrastructure, building technological infrastructure, for example, internet. Today, many universities and schools across the continent are closed because of the pandemic, while in the Western Hemisphere, most of these countries still have school happening virtually because there is infrastructure. So this is the time to invest in infrastructure to have long-term return on these investments. The other area that could benefit from the additional capital raised through debt could potentially be in social services. Many African countries have large informal economy sectors. So flea market traders often don't have insurance, any form of financial security. The government could create a fund that generate additional income to fund expenses towards welfare, so housing, uh, meals, or let's say transportation and things like that. So it's really important to think about the way the funds raised through that are used in African nations. So debt in itself is not an issue. How the debt is used is a big but big concern. So those are my thoughts for reflections, and I hope to hear from you.